You've been waiting for God to take it away. The pain that sits somewhere between your chest and your throat, that weight you carry into every morning, every prayer, every quiet moment when the world goes still enough for you to feel it again. You've asked Him to move it. You've wept over it. You've made deals in the dark. And He hasn't moved it. And somewhere, in a place you've never quite said out loud, a thought has been growing like a weed you keep pulling up but can't seem to kill. Maybe He's not coming. I know what that thought feels like, not as a theological question you debate with someone over coffee, as a wound. Because here's what nobody talks about when they talk about why God allows suffering. The answer you need isn't a theological one, it's a relational one. For people who grew up in homes where love arrived and then left, where the people who were supposed to stay didn't, God's silence in the middle of pain doesn't register as unanswered prayer. It registers as proof of something you've been afraid was true since you were small. That you're on your own. Again, there's a term in psychology for this. It's called an internal working model. The emotional blueprint your nervous system quietly built from your earliest experiences of being loved, overlooked, or left. And that blueprint doesn't stay at the door of your childhood home. It follows you into your prayer life. When the pain continues and God doesn't remove it, your wounded heart doesn't hear, "I am with you." It hears the same silence it heard the night no one came. But what if everything you've been taught about why God allows suffering has been missing the one truth that would actually change everything? Not a 5-step guide, not a theological framework, something far older, buried in the biology of a seed that has to die before it can live, and in the story of a man named Job who said things to God that would make most of us uncomfortable to read out loud. Stay with me, because by the time you understand what is actually happening inside your pain, you will never interpret God's silence the same way again. Here's something most people don't know about seeds. Certain seeds, the kind that grow into the most resilient trees on Earth, cannot germinate in warmth. They require a process called cold stratification. The seed must be buried in frozen ground, enclosed in darkness, held at temperatures that feel from the inside like death. Not for a day, not for a week, sometimes for months. And here is what botanists discovered. Without that specific cold, that specific pressure, that specific dark, the seed's outer shell will never crack. The mechanism inside the seed that holds its entire future will never be triggered. Warmth doesn't break the shell. Comfort doesn't release what's inside. Only winter does. Now sit with that for a moment, because you might be in the winter right now. And everything inside you is reading it as abandonment, as evidence that God has stopped paying attention, that your prayers are bouncing off something and falling back down, that He's moved on to someone who has more faith, more consistency, a cleaner story. But winter soil is not a graveyard. It just looks like one from inside the seed. The Apostle Paul, a man who experienced shipwrecks, beatings, imprisonment, and a suffering he begged God 3 times to remove, wrote something strange from inside a Roman prison cell. He said, "I have learned in whatever state I am to be content." Learned, not received as a gift during worship, not downloaded in a moment of breakthrough. Learned through the process, through the seasons that felt like God had gone quiet. And then he wrote something that people quote without understanding what it cost him to say. "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Not despite the suffering, through the one who descended into the frozen ground alongside him. But here is where everything shifts, and I need you to stay here with me. The reason your pain feels like abandonment isn't because God left. It's because of who first taught you what abandonment feels like. Researchers who study how human beings form emotional bonds, particularly in early childhood, discovered something that should permanently change how you read your own suffering. Children who grow up in environments of inconsistent love, neglect, or absence develop what they call an anxious attachment pattern. Their nervous systems become hypervigilant, always scanning, always waiting for the moment the love stops, always braced for the person to disappear. And when pain continues, when prayers go unanswered for weeks, then months, that hypervigilant system does exactly what it was trained to do. It assumes the worst. It calls it abandonment. It builds a case. But here is the truth your nervous system was never given access to. The Father who allows the winter is not your Father who left. He is not the parent who chose something else over you. He is not the one who made you feel like your pain was inconvenient, like your tears were too much, like needing love was a weakness you needed to hide. He is the one who designed winter soil and chose to be buried in it with you. I know what the resistance sounds like right now. But if he really loved me, he would end this. A loving God wouldn't let this continue. I want to sit in that with you because that is not a faithless question. That is one of the most honest things a hurting person can say. Job said it out loud for 37 chapters straight. He didn't ask politely, he accused God. He demanded answers. He sat in the wreckage of his life and refused every tidy explanation his friends tried to offer, the same explanations we still hand people today. God is testing you. This will make you stronger. Just trust the process. And God's response wasn't to rebuke Job for the questions. He rebuked Job's friends for the easy answers. Which means your anguish, your anger, your exhausted prayers, none of that disqualifies you from God's presence. It might be the most biblically honest thing you've felt in years. There is a particular kind of loneliness that lives inside pain that won't end. It's not just the pain itself. It's the quiet fear that starts to build beneath it, the fear that maybe you're doing faith wrong, that maybe the people who seem untouched by suffering have something you don't, that maybe you're simply not the kind of person God heals. And if you grew up learning to make yourself small, to need very little, to expect the worst, to carry everything alone because depending on someone always led to disappointment, that fear doesn't just ache. It confirms. It takes every unanswered prayer and stacks it on top of every moment no one showed up, building a case quietly against your own worthiness of being loved without conditions. But here is what the seed knows that the wounded heart forgets. The shell is not the tree. The person you have become, the one shaped by what was done to you, the one who learned to survive on very little because wanting too much was dangerous, that is not the person God is protecting inside this winter. That is the shell he is breaking open. Not to destroy you. To release what was always inside you, but could never push through until the pressure of the cold did what warmth never could. Romans 8 says it with a precision that still takes my breath away. The Spirit you received does not make you slaves so that you live in fear again. Rather, the Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship. Adoption. Not a probationary period, not survive enough suffering to qualify, not a relationship you earn by enduring the winter long enough. Adoption already decided, already sealed, already real, being revealed through the breaking. The winter doesn't create what's inside the seed. It unlocks what was already placed there. Your pain is not evidence that God has withheld his love. It is the soil where the identity of an orphan finally loses its grip. When that shifts, when you stop reading your suffering through the eyes of the parent who left and begin to see it through the hands of the father who stayed, everything changes. Not because the pain disappears immediately, sometimes it doesn't, but because the meaning of the pain transforms underneath you. It stops being proof that you are forgotten. It becomes evidence that something in you is growing roots deep enough to hold what is coming. The strongest trees on earth do not grow in greenhouses. They grow in places where the winter was real, where the roots had to fight for water, where the soil pushed back. And they hold. Through storms that would level everything that was never tested. They hold. Maybe the question was never really, why does God allow my pain to continue? Maybe the question underneath it, the one that has been there since before you had words for it, is this. Do I believe I am worth staying for? Every child who learned to make themselves invisible, who swallowed their needs, who braced for the moment love would decide they were too much, they carry that question without knowing it. And God's answer is not a removal of the pain. His answer is a presence inside it. He is not the father who left you in the winter. He is the warmth inside the frozen ground, unseen, patient, at work in the dark, breaking open exactly what needs to be broken, so that what was always meant to live in you can finally grow toward the light. The waiting is not abandonment. It is winter doing its only irreplaceable work. And you are not a casualty of that process. You are the seed. If something in this reached the place in you that's been waiting to be told the truth, share it with someone who's in their own winter right now. And if you want to keep going deeper on healing, identity, and what it means to truly be a child of God, subscribe and stay close. There's more I want to show you.